Security Operations Center. He's going to elaborate on the needs for the end-to-end security governance in an enterprise, and will also touch on the leadership traits that he believes will be critical for a security leader in today's and tomorrow's era of digital transformation. Let's give an Atlanta welcome to Mr. Mike Howard.
Thank you, Fabian. Appreciate it. Well, good morning, everybody. I hope you all braved the rain. We did a mad dash in the rain to get here, but they've got our exercise for the morning. First of all, I want to thank GC&E. I want to thank Dan, Dennis, Rob, certainly been gracious to host us here. Brenda Garrett from GC&E, who's been wonderful in supporting us and logistically in getting us here. So it's been a wonderful experience. And I want to thank GC for bringing me here because I'm a retiree now, so I got a lot of time on my hands, right? So I got to find something to do. When I was thinking about what to talk to you all about, we talk about digital transformation. That's a buzzword, right? And everybody is using it nowadays. And what I want to try to do is try to look at it, digital transformation, and try to just simplify it a little bit from the eyes of a former chief security officer. I spent 16 years at Microsoft as their chief security officer. I spent 22 years prior to that at the Central Intelligence Agency. And then in my youth, when I had darker hair and a bigger afro, I was a cop for a couple of years in Oakland, California. So I've had a bit of a journey career-wise, but I could say that from the private sector perspective, being at Microsoft, it was an eye-opener for me. I was by no means a technology expert. I don't claim to be one now. But I have learned a lot from a lot of the people that have worked for me and the people I work with at Microsoft. And as Fabian mentioned in the introduction, and you'll see, I'm going to walk you through first what I think, from my optic, what digital transformation is, especially from a security point of view, give you an idea of the journey that we've taken in global security at Microsoft as a physical security entity, and how we've built up, I think a fairly world-class operations center portfolio to going into now a virtualized environment. And then, as Fabian said, some of the leadership traits that I think you need to have in this brave new world of digital transformation. I'm living digital transformation so much that I was joking with my wife today. So we were going to leave today and go back home, but we love Atlanta. We want to spend an extra day here. So Brenda and team were gracious enough to actually get us another night at the hotel. But the way things turn out, you have to, because there were two confirmation numbers. When we checked in yesterday, they said, okay, well, you have to check out today, and then we'll recheck you back in, sort of the same thing. And I was thinking, it'd be interesting if you were able to use digital transformation so that the whole thing could have been done maybe via an app, right? So that whole transaction is, because of machine learning, because of AI, that whole transaction could have been done in the background so that it's very seamless. And then I get a notification on my app saying that it's been done, you've been checked out, checked in. Because at the end of the day, what digital transformation is I heard this from a Microsoft executive who is working heavily on digital transformation for the company. It's a manual process with a digital construct. Now that's kind of a fancy way of saying it's an end-to-end process, right? A lot of people, even when I used to work, we worked in the finance organization at Global Security. Corporate security organizations, as you know, fall up into a lot of different sort of verticals at a company. Some are under HR, some are legal. We were under finance. And even within my boss's org, as some of the leaders were talking about digital transformation, they would talk about, well, we deployed a bot here or something there to make a process smoother. That's part of digital transformation. But if you really want to think about digital transformation in a simpler way, this one executive talked about Uber. So think about before Uber got into the mix. I want to go from point A to point B, so for those of you old enough to remember Yellow Pages, you look in the Yellow Pages and, look up number of Yellow Cab, call Yellow Cab, tell them where you want to go, and then Yellow Cab gets there. You don't know when they're going to get there. Hopefully they'll get there soon. And then you tell them where you want to go, and then they deposit you there. And then at the end of the day, you do an exchange of cash or what have you, or credit card, and there you go. Uber obviously changed all that. They took a manual process and put a digital construct to it. So everything's from the app. And from that app, you're telling them where you want to go. You know the name of the driver. You know the driver's background, as much as they give you on the app. You know when the driver's going to get there. And then, obviously, the exchange of money is already taken care of. So that's a simple way of talking about digital transformation. At the end of the day, it's really trying to imagine, what your particular lines of business are and where it can go through the digital transformation process. Now, we started doing that within our own global security organization about 2 years ago, and we're still in the midst of it. But I kind of liken it to the way the cloud was 10, 12 years ago, right? And how people looked at the cloud and they weren't exactly embracing it right off the bat. Some people still don't, but at the end of the day, it was something that enterprises were going to embrace. Why? Because it was going to save them money, as well as the security aspect. And so cloud is, obviously here now. Digital transformation is going to take place, whether we like it or not. There were a couple of surveys that were taken recently. One survey, about 52% of the chief executives that were interviewed knew about digital transformation, but they felt that their IT knowledge and awareness of digital transformation was keeping them from trying to think about implementing a digital transformation strategy. But, 82% of the respondent companies that had been surveyed by this one survey thought of digital transformation as something that would really help them competitively in the market. So part of the, you look around this room here, we know about technology, right? We kind of live technology, we breathe technology, and this is kind of our thing. But you think about a lot of companies, a lot of enterprises, they use technology, but they don't necessarily embrace technology in the sense of how are we going to use it to make our enterprise smoother? How are we going to take these manual processes, even something simple as what I talked about at the hotel this morning, and how do we make an end-to-end process smoother and better? I think, as you can see from the slide, these are some of the reasons why some companies, some entities don't embrace digital transformation or don't want to kind of understand what it is. Because they're not familiar with it. Their current IT systems are not really geared for that. And they're also fearful of the unknown. What does this mean? How much investment am I going to have to deploy? How is this going to work in my own organization? There we go. So, in essence, this talks a little bit about our transformation strategy at Microsoft over the years. And the first part really is to get in your mind that you have to envision what's possible out there, for you in your own parts of the world. For us in global security, it was, what is it that we're doing now that we could be doing better? And how do we also get ahead of where technology is about to take us, right? And so part of that is envisioning what's possible. Even if it seems like it's impossible, that's a good thing, because you have to get your mindset out of this can't be done as opposed to it can be done. And the other part of it is your people. Nothing gets done unless your people are there for the ride, and that they understand why you're going in a certain direction from a digital perspective, and what's the ROI for them. Even within our own global security group, I remember I think I was telling Rob last night at dinner, when we were embarking on our own digital transformation journey, which I guess I said is still ongoing, and I'll give you some more details in a few minutes. We had an offsite with our international team, in London. And one of my guys, Mike Foynes, who Rob knows very well, a lot of you know, or some of you know, is really a thought leader in my former organization. I mean, he's kind of like Spock. I mean, he gets it, right? He's really out there. And he was talking about where we were going to go as an organization. And he got some pushback, actually, from some of our regional leaders who said, no, we can't go there. We still need, you know, some of the traditional physical security things that we've been employing over the years. And it was an interesting debate to watch because they were both right in a sense, right? In the one sense, one size doesn't fit all. So if you're going to digitally transform your organization, especially from a physical security standpoint, you have to make sure you're doing it smartly, right? But the other piece of it is that what can you envision, whether it's, you know, what we call frictionless environment or some other kinds of things I'll talk about, where it kind of turns traditional security on its head. It was a really good debate to have, and it was good to see that there was pushback. But part of it is preparing your people, right? You're not just going to jam it down their throats. They have to see what's in it for them. They have to also lend to your strategy. And the ground truth of what our regional security leaders do on a day-to-day basis has to be built into our digital transformation strategy. Otherwise, it's one of these typical things where, I mean, Colin Powell said it best. He said, the field is right until proven wrong. And I've kind of tried to live that with my teams, right? So we're not just going to make a bunch of decisions out of Seattle, Redmond, our head campus, and just jam it down their throats. So you have to transform your people. And then the other part speaks for itself in terms of automating your data and connecting your devices. And as you see kind of the line going up, it's just kind of you can read it for yourself, kind of the journey of how you work. You know, in our world, we're used to have static reports, paper reports, interactive dashboards then evolved, and then now getting into an era where hopefully through machine learning and AI, you can get more predictive in how you are going to look at security. And I'll talk about that in a second. So I actually stole the top part of this slide from one of our Microsoft evangelists who likes to talk a lot about the journey of where we were at Microsoft from, you know, we go from mainframes to the PCs, sort of the Bill Gates era, where the mantra was for Microsoft a PC on every desk around the world, you know, to where you got into the internet, the web, you know, that started connecting people and information together. And then obviously mobile, and then now the future, this thing called convergence, right? You have this summit, this Converged Security Summit. Convergence now is different than I think what it was 10 years ago. 10, 15 years ago, when I first got into security, there was this push called convergence. And I see Steve Lasky here, and I've known Steve for a long time, and I think you remember, back then convergence was kind of like, okay, we're going to put everything under an Uber CSO that's going to drive everything, and that was kind of the main thing. And it had legs for a little bit, but it didn't really take, because in the real world, most CSOs don't own both the IT and physical side of the house. I belong to an organization called ISMA, the International Security Management Association, and I was their president. And then a lot of you know as-is. I ran the CSO Roundtable, now the CSO Center, for a couple of years. And so, you know, a lot of my colleagues are the top CSOs around the world, and very few of them actually own both. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It depends how you work well with each other. I'll get to that in a few minutes. My point is that convergence now is different. It doesn't necessarily mean a person. Like, it has to be an Uber CSO. Convergence is how do you look at end-to-end security holistically in an organization, like Microsoft. How do we look at it? Do we look at it as physical and IT or cyber, or do we look at it as security, as enterprise risk? Because that's how you have to approach it. It's not necessarily security, it's enterprise risk. How do you fall into that enterprise risk portfolio from a digital standpoint? Physical piece of it merged with the cyber part to collectively protect, respond, and defend your enterprise. And so the bottom part is GGG stands for Guns, Guards, and Gates. A lot of you have heard of that term, but that's where we kind of were when we started our journey at Microsoft. And I'll show you some slides, but we had something called the Life Safety Control Center. It was built in the, I'd say, mid-90s, and at that time it had the best of Microsoft software and other partner products. And but for any number of reasons, it was allowed to atrophy. And back then, security was viewed as the guns, guards, and gates, right? Break glass in case of emergency. Otherwise, we don't want to hear from you. We don't want to see you. You really are not a critical part of our enterprise from a business standpoint. A big part of this convergence piece, while, you know, as my boss, my former boss used to like to say, with all the stuff that we did in global security to push business and to help Microsoft make money, and we were able to do that, your main job, your bread and butter is life safety and to protect people. And so that has to be the number one job of a security professional. But back in those days, people in the C-suite didn't really figure that we mattered that much when it came to actually being part of the enterprise. And part of this whole digital transformation piece, there's another piece of that, which is that you can think about ways to monetize your digital transformation strategy to help out your particular businesses. So that for us as end users, right, as the traditional physical security organization that is a cost center, traditionally sucks money from companies, how is it can you use digital transformation to actually help turn that around so that not only are you securing your enterprise, not only are you contributing to the company's bottom line, but how are you then starting to be perceived differently by the C-suite as not the guns, guards, and gates, but as business enablers. There's a huge chunk of this convergence piece that I think a lot of people in the security world need to think about and broaden their minds about what their role in enterprise risk is and in the enterprise. And then we went into the GSOC era, Global Security Operations Center, and then now we're going into what we call VSOC, and I'll talk a bit about that in a few seconds. But that was kind of our journey, which goes along with sort of the journey of technology from our standpoint. So these were the early days. This guy here, he looks like he wants to kill himself, all right? He looks like he's having a bad day. Now, I don't know who he is, but we call this the sad guy slide. He's the most famous sad guy from Microsoft, but we don't know where he is right now. But this used to be our old Life Safety Control Center. And you see he's buried with monitors and modems and what we call Post-it notes and all this other kind of stuff. And this was the Life Safety Control Center back in the day. You can see here, of course, some of you know Brian Tuscan, who took over as Chief Security Officer. Back then, Brian ran investigations for us, and when there was a case to be done, his investigators, as you all have, some of you have experienced this, had to go through hours and hours of tape, a VCR tape, VHS, in order to get to that one segment where you can catch the bad guy or gal. This was the guts of our Life Safety Control Center, and again, you got all these manuals, and it was interesting when we still benchmark, right? Because as we're moving along into this virtualized environment, there are still a lot of my colleagues and a lot of folks from the U.S. government, actually, that are still coming to benchmark. You know, we had Director of National Intelligence, we've had Homeland Security, we've had, you know, world leaders come over to visit the GSOC. And it's interesting, they comment on, whoops, let me go back here, I didn't want to do that. They comment on this because they said that's how we are still in our government organizations, right? They're still manually looking at this as opposed to how do you digitize all that information and make it so that, you know, if you need to figure out a plan for evacuation for your Barcelona office, well, Joe has that plan, and it's in Joe's safe, but Joe's on vacation, so how are you going to get, right, as opposed to something that you can access. This actually, we like to show this because this was our, back in our MSN days, we had an MSN office in London. We had 6 security officers with all these banks of monitors that nobody can really monitor. It was kind of a waste of time. Once we built our GSOC operation, we were able to get rid of this, turn this back over to the business, and use the operations center to monitor the building, be able to do all the things that we needed to be done. It was kind of our first step at digital transformation. So this is the GSOC as it's currently configured, but it's going away. At one point, we had 3 global security operations centers. We were the first ones, I think, in the corporate security world to have 3 interconnected operations centers. Back in those old guns, guards, and gates days, after that life safety control center had been built up, all these different kind of mini security operations centers started popping up around the country and globally, organically. There was no rhyme, no reason, no strategy behind it. They just, hey, we got a footprint here in Florida. Let's have a mini ops center, and they were not connected. So we got rid of all that. We built 3, one in our Redmond headquarters campus to cover all the Americas, one in the UK in our Thames Valley Park campus to cover all of Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and then one in Hyderabad, India to cover Asia Pacific and China. And it was a game changer for us. We built a business case. It was the first time that corporate security group, which we then changed the name to global security to map to where we were going, actually built a business case, took it up to then CEO Steve Ballmer, and pitched this idea of an operations center that could cover the world, could monitor and respond, but from a true interoperability standpoint, if Redmond went down through an earthquake or catastrophic event, either Hyderabad or the UK could take over life safety for all of the Americas. You could access cameras, you could lock down doors, remotely. You can radio over IP, dispatch officers in Redmond to respond from India, because you're also using a similar user interface for the information on where those officers are located, where the buildings are at Microsoft in Redmond. So it was true interoperability, and we demoed that and over and over and over again, and it worked out. It worked out very well for us. And again, like I said, it's a model that continues to work, and people are on different phases of their journeys when it comes to, in my world, when it comes to operations centers. Some are where we are, even better. Others are just starting that journey, and so we're here to help them and benchmark with them as much as we can. So now we're going into the VSOC. This is a rendition of what we're attempting to build in our global security world. And basically what you're looking at here is, the guts of it is what we call a virtual white wall, a single view platform. Now I'll give you an example of how this is going to work. So right now, a typical situation in any corporate campus is you have someone that was terminated from the campus for whatever reasons. And their badge is invalid now, right? But either security or HR, they don't collect that badge. So then the person, let's say, and this has happened a couple times since when I was at Microsoft, where and both times it was an estranged husband. So husband and wife worked together on campus. The estranged husband was the one that was, for whatever reason, kicked out of the company. There's a no trespass with the police, and all of our receptionists know to be on the lookout for this person. But the person then tries to get access to the building where his wife is, right, his estranged spouse. So you get the badge swipe. You can't get in unless you try to tailgate, but automatically the GSOC obviously gets the notification, hey, invalid badge hit. Then starts a series of really good, because of trial and error over years, manual processes to figure out, okay, you got the technology saying it's coming from building 34, okay, now we got to dispatch officers to building 34, and then do some more digging. And again, this happens fairly rapidly, but you got to do some more digging and check on, okay, who this person is, okay, boom, all right, let's go check with investigations quickly to see, what's the background, and okay. And hopefully we can respond in time, which we have been able to, and keep bad things from happening. However, when we took a look at some technologies that were available, and we're working with some partners out there, what would happen if through machine learning, through technology, all those things that manual process had a digital construct? So when that invalid badge when the badge gets swiped, the operator, yes, will get notified of building 34. And the schematic opens up on building 34. At the same time, the information from the investigations group pops up. At the same time, that information is being relayed to our mobile units en route. And at the same time, because of the feeds that have been baked into the guts of this technology, you know automatically that, hey, there's a person in building 34 that this person may be after, and that person gets a notification right off the bat, right? That's where we're headed towards, and we had a beta, I think, this summer of looking at this. And we were thinking about this too in the context of that tragic shooting that happened in Florida, right? And in the aftermath of that shooting, as you remember, the school shooting in Parkland, you found that there were disparate pieces of information that a lot of people had. School authorities had some information, FBI had some information, local police, mental health authorities. They all had information that might have triggered the authorities saying, we've got to look at this guy, the shooter, you know, just take a look at him hard, right? Had they had the right digital transformation, had a lot of these feeds been put into a data lake that, let's say, they all shared, chances are that from a predictive point of view, because it's not just about reaction, we're going to the VSOC because we want to be predictive. We believe that through the machine learning and the feeds, and it takes time, that in that particular case, there could have been some advanced warning to authorities saying, hey, this is the information put together. You authorities figure out what you're going to do. May not always work, but that's kind of the concept of what we're going at. And that's what we're envisioning the GSOC to be. Not only reactive, a VSOC, not only reactive, and hopefully being able to take out a lot of the manual processes to make us faster in how we react, but also make us more predictive. If that same machine learning can also say, okay, our CEO is getting ready to go to the Philippines in 3 months, and even though we have an intel team that looks at that kind of stuff, what happens if the machine learning says, boom, these are the things that are going to happen in the next 3 months there. You may want to think about delaying the trip or going some other place. So that's kind of where we're headed at with the VSOC. You know, it speaks for itself, some of the benefits, you know, and we're going to look at the edge, security identity at the edge. One of the other things we're looking at is, and this is one of the controversial things, is, you know, you have a typical card access situation. You swipe, right? Well, that's not identity. That's your face, Mike Howard's face, with a chip. And as long as Mike Howard has that card key, then everything's good. If Rob Heil happens to steal stuff like he does from me, and he takes my card, then he becomes Mike Howard. But if you have identity at the edge, and we've seen this demoed with some folks we're working with, where, you know, again, it takes time to get all that data in. But we've seen you can do multiple hits on faces of people who belong, you know, facial scans at, you know, sub 1 second speed. And that's kind of the future, identity at the edge. But there also is a reduced cost in terms of, just like with the cloud, there was a reduced cost to IT infrastructure. There'll be a reduced cost here as we take out some of the manual processes, put in some of our digital construct, so to speak. And, you know, you can read this for yourself. I don't like reading off of slides. I've kind of talked about this in the scenarios I've given. But the idea was that we wanted to make sure that we pushed ourselves. And we looked at our world, and while we could have sat back and be fat, dumb, and happy in terms of where we were with GSOC, we knew it wasn't the right thing to do. Because for the company, for us to grow, and that earlier slide talked about, what can you envision? We envision a security world where we're faster, more predictive, less cost, and hopefully, enable business. Because at the end of the day, we're here to enable Microsoft's business to move forward. You're here to enable your businesses to move forward. So how can you do that with digital transformation? Kind of changing the subject just a little bit, want to talk a little bit about our one security approach. I mentioned earlier about this convergence and how convergence was looked at many years ago as everything under one umbrella. What makes things work is that true partnership between cyber and physical. And I would contend that in a lot of companies, you don't have that. You have both entities working separately in silos. They come together if the balloon goes up, so to speak. Bad things happen. They got to come together to manage an issue, and they go back into their corners. There are a lot of reasons why this happens. Sometimes it's institutional. Sometimes it's personal, like the CSO and the CSO don't like each other. Sometimes it's whatever. But it's terrible, and it does happen. But we're all here to do this, right? Whether you're physical or cyber, you're here to protect, detect, and respond. And so what we believe in at Microsoft is we have a governance structure. We call it the IRMC, the Information Risk Management Council. And it was started by our CSO, Brett Arsenault, me, representing physical, and initially it was privacy, trustworthy computing, and data center. It's now morphed. We've got more people from business units, including Windows and cloud and all these other folks that are part of it. But at the end of the day, we adhere to a one Microsoft policy, security policy, which we validate every year up to Satya, our CEO, and our C-suite. And these are the principles that we work on in terms of protecting customer data and ensuring data integrity. You can read this for yourself. And then, kind of what our strategies are and then what our service lines are. But at the end of the day, we work together to look at the top 10 risks to the company. We map those every year, twice a year actually, to revalidate those. Again, that gets reported to the board, that gets reported to the C-suite. And there's some good debates that happen in these meetings, but the idea is that you have some structure where both sides are working together. They're not even both sides, it's really one security working together end to end for your company. Even to the point where we're doing exercises together. So sometimes there'll be a physical security slant to the exercise. Sometimes there'll be more of a cyber and tabletops, real world exercises. We bring in the CEO and the leadership team to play a part in these exercises because at a certain level we need an enterprise level decision. So then they also understand kind of what we're doing and from the security point of view. But the other part of that, we show them this one united face of security, which is important. And I think that's important in any governance model. You get back to digital transformation, we didn't decide to do the VSOC in a silo. We talked to Brett and his team. We got them involved in there. We're going to have a common data lake, right? So that as something happens where someone is supposed to be in Redmond, but they badge in London, is there a way to make sure that everybody gets that information so you can figure out how to manage it? And it's worked out quite well. Leadership traits. I'm high on leadership. And I think that these are the traits that you need to have as you're moving forward into this future of digital transformation. Certainly you have to have the security skills, and you should know technology to a certain extent. But the big part is that growth mindset. That's what keeps people from advancing. That's what keeps people stagnant. That's what keeps people from moving forward. Is you have to have that growth mindset. Doesn't mean you can't make mistakes. It just means that you learn from those mistakes. One of the things I loved about my former CEO was that his whole thing was the growth mindset. So he didn't mind people trying different strategies the way we're doing with VSOC, right? VSOC's a big gamble for us. Like I said, we got the approval from the higher ups to move forward with that. It's a lot of money, but we didn't have to go there. But we were in an environment where you were allowed to incubate ideas. If they make sense and it looks like there's an ROI for, obviously for security, but for the company at the end of the day. And I believe it will work because that's what I believe, right? But at the end of the day, let's say it didn't, or pieces of it didn't work. That's okay, because it was a journey that was meant to be done, and we needed to do it. And so that growth mindset is I think the biggest part. And then I stole this slide from my boss, and this just talks about a leadership journey. And this is no secret to anybody, but I like to call it out. When you start off as a leader, you know, when I started off as a police officer many years ago, I was sort of on the bottom left-hand quadrant, right? Really learning the tactical parts of the job, learning your job, and more of a short-term mindset. But as you move along in that leadership journey, hopefully you become you know, more of a business enabler, and you become a subject matter expert, business enabler, and then a trusted leader. And then your lens becomes more strategic. And so this is what we try to instill in our leaders within my former organization, because you gotta have this as you grow. You still need people to do the nuts and bolts, obviously, of the job, and so there'll always be people doing that tactical stuff. But if you're, and everybody can be a leader no matter what level you're at. You don't have to be CSO to be a leader. You can be a leader at every level. But, you know, this is the journey, and it never ends. You're a trusted leader, you still have more to learn. You still have more to grow. There's still more to do. And then the last slide is there's a guy named Marshall Goldsmith. Some of you may have read some of his books. He's a leadership guru, and one of his books was What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And I read it, and I bought it for my leadership team a few years ago. And the premise is, you know, you may have a certain level of success in your life, and which is great. We all want to succeed. And the analogy here is, let's say our GSOCs. The GSOC that we have, you know, is very successful and has been and will continue to be until we morph finally into the VSOC. But what got us here to this point is not going to get us where we need to go in the future, because we need to push the envelope and go that way. And so the idea is to continue to keep pushing yourself. Don't rest on whatever laurels you have, but always push the envelope. And I guess I would, you know, in the context of this Converged Summit is, you know, keep that in your mind as you look at other technologies, as you look at other ways of doing things. You know, have a growth mindset. Think about the possibilities of technology, and think about being sometimes a naysayer to your own self, right? This works for me, this is what I like, this is what I'm going to stick with. That may not be the right answer. Think more broadly, and I think that you've got a lot of thought leaders in this room to converse with, to learn with, to grow. And I think I love these kind of venues because I always get hopefully as much out of it as hopefully the audience gets from me. So that's it for my prepared stuff. So I'm ready to take any questions you might have, or if you want to throw something, that's fine too. You have a question? Okay.
Great. We've got a mic coming right up here, Rob.
Mike, I promise that Surface Pro that I borrowed from you, I'll bring that.
That was 4 years ago.
So having been part of the due diligence when you guys started the VSOC concept with one of my former companies, can you share with, we have a lot of our technology partners here, on how you guys kind of perfected that proof of concept process to get some of these technology ideas in to vet them? I'd like to hear a little more about that.
Yeah, good question. So, you know, first it was kind of, you know, it really started with, believe it or not, process mapping. We brought in somebody first, before we even got into the technology piece, we took every part of our organization, and this person named Adriana Girdler, who's an expert on process mapping. And I was not a big process mapping kind of guy, right? That's not my thing. But I became a convert because she took every one of our processes, whether investigations, operations, crisis management, executive protection, and said, okay, so for X activity, what do you all do? And we'd map it out. And as you went through the exercise, you realized that we're taking too many steps. There are things that are redundant that we could take out. So first was just to scale down on sort of on paper kind of what we were as an organization, and as big as we were, how we allowed ourselves to get kind of bureaucratic in a lot of ways and not agile. So then we took that and we looked at, okay, from a strategic point of view and transformational point of view, you know, what are the technologies that we currently have, but what are the things that are coming down the pipeline that we think we're going to need to employ to put into our virtualized environment. And then again, it was a process of getting out there, talking to partners, seeing what they had, but also seeing where they were going to go with their technologies. But the other piece of it was what I alluded to a few minutes ago. Did they have a mindset of, no, that can't be done, as opposed to, yeah, I could see that. And it wasn't just from a sales point of view, yeah, we can do that, right? It was, you know, we wanted strategic partners that had our vision and could think about things that were not being thought of, all right? And obviously we wanted, you know, best in class, and we were looking at, again, current technologies, future technologies, and how that's going to map to our thing. And then was trial and error too, right? Working with partners and seeing what they could do, doing a lot of beta testing, and seeing, like we did, you know, in Ireland months ago, where we were able to see some of the capabilities of the biometrics and the facial mapping, and seeing on the edge device how fast you could capture it, faster than the cloud, right? The cloud gave us like a 30-second, 40-second latency, whereas identity at the edge device could give us real time, right? Again, not perfected, but it was a proof of concept. We thought, okay, we might be able to go down this route. So that was a lot of it. Our technology team under Mike Faddis and Brian Tuscan really played a huge part in vetting it. But the other piece of it was making sure that they weren't just looking at it from a technology point of view. They were looking at it from the point of view of, say, Chuck Randolph, who runs our executive protection unit. So Chuck, you know, we have these technologies we're thinking about, but is that going to work for Chuck and his team or not, right? Because if it doesn't work for Chuck, then it's a waste of our time. So we call it strategic integration, and it's hard. It's hard to do that, but you have to make sure that those strategic impetus for your lines of business map to current and future technologies and what partners can help you to get there, currently and in the future. Any other questions?
Yeah. How did you, over here,
Okay.
How did you monetize to your executives the cost of a campus disruption and the spider web across customers and multiple campuses?
So what we did was, yeah, that's a great question. So when we built up the GSOCs, we approached and obviously, yes, we use the GSOCs to manage multiple crisis situations, earthquakes, you know, terrorist events, what have you, all that stuff. So what we did was we approached our sales teams and said, look, we have this operations center that we believe is state of the art, and it obviously uses the Microsoft stack, but it uses some really good partner products. And we know that you're bringing in enterprise customers to campus to try to either, back in those days, sell them a multi-year enterprise license for software, or get them to re-sign. So we said, instead of you bringing them to our executive briefing center and giving them a boring PowerPoint on PowerPoint or anything else that we have, why don't you bring them to an operations center? We can show them in a security environment how we become more efficient, more organized, and in the security environment, but it can translate to any environment, any enterprise environment. And then if you tell us that we were instrumental in helping that seal the deal, would you give us credit for, if it was a $10 million, $50 million deal, obviously your sales, you keep the hard dollars, but would you give us credit for helping out? And we used to call it revenue influencing. And that became its own vertical, became its own program, to the point where, again, my boss is the chief accounting officer, said, I'd never seen a corporate security group that actually was able to capture, you know, these dollars validated by sales that they wouldn't have made had had we not done this. The other piece of it was because of the solutions that we had, the partners we had, we could turn over people that wanted to build GSOCs to partners, and we get some pull-through dollars from there too. We hope to do the same thing with the VSOC, you know, once it gets off the ground eventually. But first you got to work out all the kinks, and that's going to take a while. But that's how we did it. Anything else? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mike, please stay up here. Dennis Bristol is going to come up to say thank you to you. Jim Mann is going to join him up here as well. Jim Mann, Vice President of Security.
Thank you.
There he is. Stand right in the middle for a photo together. Thank you, Mike Howard.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 15-minute break, a stretch break. Coffee stations and are to the back there, beluga whales over here, and exhibitors.